Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Stephanie. I'm so excited that you're here to follow along my journey. One of the more difficult parts for me was having a PICC line. And so if you are not familiar with what a PICC line is, it is a peripherally inserted central catheter, which is a really fancy way to say it's a tube that's placed in your arm and runs up into your chest. And it's a way that they can deliver medication, nutrients, and do blood draws when other vasculature is compromised or they aren't able to put a port in. And so I had to start with a PICC line due to the amount of disease that was in my lung and chest. So because of my tumor, it compromised the vasculature in that area, but also they couldn't place the port because essentially the tumor was just taking over that area. And so my only option was a PICC line in my right arm. That was it. And I'm a righty, I'm right side dominant. This was extremely difficult for me in almost every way of life. So I'm a mom of two little boys who are very playful, active, love to be cuddled and held. I am a chiropractor and I utilize multiple adjusting techniques, but I'm very hands-on and I use my body a lot. And after I had the PICC line placed, it felt like I had an arm that belonged on a body 4 times my size. It was just heavy, weak, it was painful, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It honestly was absolutely terrible for me. And it was the cause of the first panic attack that I had during my journey too. And so rewind to when I got my PICC line put in. It was a Monday and I was in the hospital. And I was due to have my PICC line inserted, and I had 2 failed PICC line procedure attempts. So they don't put you under for it. They use lidocaine to numb the area before they insert the catheter. And it just was not working. After like 45 minutes to an hour of trying each time, it just was not working. And so they had to call in an outside team outside of the hospital to come place my PICC line. And just so you get an idea of timeline here, this is a Monday afternoon, and I had to be at the cancer center by 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the next day, to be able to start my treatment, or I would not have been able to get started with chemo that week because my regimen was 5 days in a row and they close on Saturdays. So I had Tuesday through Saturday to get my chemo, and that all relied on me having a PICC line since the port was not an option and you can't insert it intravenous through the veins. So after 2 failed attempts, they call this team in and I'm told they could be here as late as 11 o'clock tonight. They're very busy. We never know when they're going to get here. So I am anxiously waiting for these people to come. And then all of a sudden, it's midnight, it's 2 a.m. and nothing. There had been shift changes, so the nursing staff was different, and I think it honestly kind of got lost in the mix. And so I had to be my own best advocate. I was in the hospital by myself, and I was fighting for somebody to come put this PICC line in. Finally, Tuesday morning, they had somebody come up from radiology, and it was a God thing. This amazing gentleman placed my PICC line with ease and no discomfort, and it was an incredible experience. But also he said something to me that completely changed how I looked at chemo throughout the rest of my time, and it just really stuck with me, and I know God sent him to me for a reason. And he had said to me pretty much, it's terrible what you're about to go through, it's awful that you have to do this, and there's going to be times where the chemo feels like it's worse than the cancer, and it's going to feel like it's just destroying you. But remember that it's keeping you alive, and it's what has to be done to save your life. And I really held on to that throughout my entire journey because he was right. The chemo can be way worse than your sickness in a lot of ways. And so now looking back, I just praise God for bringing the right people into my path. And I realized that that was one of the first lessons that I was going to learn, is that things aren't always going to make sense to me with how they play out and when and why, but God already knows all of that, and he pre-planned this, and he put the people in my path at the right time and the place for very specific reasons. And so Once my PICC line was placed, I headed straight across the street to the cancer center and got started with my treatments. So my PICC line was brand new. I mean, it was still, sorry, this is gonna be very upfront and raw video. So it was still bleeding by the time that I got to the cancer center, but it was go time. And so this was my first day of chemo too. I had no idea what to expect. I go in and I have like 2 duffel bags, a Stanley cup. My arm hurts so bad. I'm dragging around these huge bags and I'm just in excruciating pain. I'm so fatigued and weak that I couldn't probably have even held one of those bags without the PICC line procedure having just happened. Thankfully, the nurses were amazing and grabbed my stuff for me. They were so helpful. But we got started with my chemo that day on time, thankfully. And I did absolutely fine with the PICC line throughout that week. It was painful, it was uncomfortable. But what I learned throughout my journey is it's very normal to experience 2 completely different or conflicting emotions at one time. And so I was so grateful and thankful for my PICC line, but I was also panicking and uncomfortable and in a lot of pain and just not happy about having to have it, if I'm being honest. And so I did great through my treatments until Saturday, and then Saturday night I was laying in my bed, and it was the first time that I had had the chemo unhooked from my PICC line for the last 5 days, and I had a panic attack. It was the first one that I had during my treatment journey, and I just kind of lost it because I'm weirded out by stuff like that. PICC lines are weird. I'm going to insert some pictures and videos and stuff during this video, and so if you're squeamish, please just be prepared for that. But the PICC lines are gross. It's a tube in your arm, and then it basically has 2 little tubes that come off of it that they can insert medications on and draw blood from. And so I was laying there like, oh my gosh, this thing is literally dangling out of my arm. And so it had been hard throughout the week because I had had the chemo hooked to it. So I had to be so careful around my kids because they want to play, they want to snuggle, they want me to pick them up. Yet my arm was pretty much not usable that week. And so I talked myself through my panic attack and it was fine. And then I went back to work. And so I'm a chiropractor. I work with my body a lot. I use techniques that are very gentle and specific, but then also techniques that require a lot of my body. And so I was in excruciating pain. Every adjustment I did, which was hundreds, I was in pain. I felt like my arm just did not belong on my body. I have a Stanley cup. I couldn't even pick up my Stanley cup. I couldn't pick up a cup of coffee. I couldn't pick up and carry my kids. And here I was working, using a lot of force and quick muscle motions, and it was excruciating. I just remember moments of like, holy crap, how am I supposed to do this? And I just had shooting nerve pain up into my arm. And then even after I got the PICC line out, I still had lingering pain in that area, and I could feel where that had been placed. And so mentally, it was very difficult for me because I was constantly reminded that this was in my arm. There's some hesitations or risks with PICC lines, and they're just not as ideal as having a port because they can cause blood clots, infection, bleeding, and especially after working with the PICC line in, mine had bled a lot. It basically just kept bleeding because I was overusing it way too much. I'm gonna insert a picture right here, so if you don't wanna see it, just close your eyes. Here it is. So I was so excited to get my PICC line taken out, but because I was septic when I went into the hospital, that was another reason I couldn't have a port procedure done, because you do have to go under for that. And so they ran my blood cultures and they came back clear. I was not septic anymore, and so I was able to get my port put in, and I was so excited about my port and to get the PICC line out. But I just want to encourage any of you who have a PICC line, yes, it's awful. It's terrible. I never want to have one again. I feel for you if you have one. But just remember, it is delivering medications that are so important for you and for your health. And I'm very grateful that I was able to get that PICC line put in, because it's the reason that I'm able to sit here today. And so God works in amazing, amazing ways. Modern medicine is an incredible thing when we need it. It has a time and a place. I would not have chosen to have to get chemo. I wish I could have done any alternative treatments other than chemotherapy, but that wasn't part of my journey. That wasn't part of my story. But that was my PICC line experience. It wasn't pretty. It was awful. It was painful. It made me panic, but it did what it had to do to serve its purpose. And I can't wait to share with you about my port experience in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I would love if you share the video. Make sure to subscribe, give it a like, leave me a comment, and stay tuned for more about my journey.